1,200 tons. Do you understand what that feels like? I am standing in the shadow of the stone of the pregnant woman here in Baalbek, Lebanon, and the sheer mass of it makes the air feel heavy. 1,200 tons. Mainstream academics, the ones writing the textbooks your children read, will look you in the eye and tell you this was cut by Romans. They will tell you it was shaped with soft iron chisels and dragged uphill by men in sandals pulling on hemp ropes. But look at it. Really look at it. This single block of limestone weighs as much as 3 Boeing 747 jets fully loaded with passengers and fuel. If I wanted to move this stone just 1 inch today, I would need the services of the largest, most advanced mobile crane on the planet, and even then, the cables might snap. We are talking about modern hydraulic limit-pushing engineering. And yet, I am supposed to believe that primitive labor moved this, that they lifted it, leveled it, and placed it with a precision we struggle to match in the 21st century. I don't buy it. I refuse to accept a narrative that insults the intelligence of the ancients. The math doesn't add up. The physics don't make sense. And if you have ever stood next to a monolith this size and felt your own insignificance, neither should you. My name is Dr. Silas Vance. For 20 years, I sat in the lecture halls of prestigious universities, repeating the approved timeline. I taught that civilization began 5,000 years ago. I taught that we are the pinnacle of human achievement. But then I started measuring. This journal in my hands contains the raw data that got me laughed out of the faculty lounge. It contains carbon dating results that shouldn't exist, geological erosion patterns that predate the last ice age, and engineering schematics of 10 specific sites across the globe that prove one terrifying truth. We are a species with amnesia. We are not the first. A global, high-tech civilization existed here long before the first pyramid was built, and these gigantic stones are their fingerprints. Today, I am going to take you to the 10 sites that history tried to hide. We are going to look at the impossible precision of Peru, the acoustic chambers of Malta, and the megalithic giants of Siberia that make the pyramids look like toys. But before we turn the page, I have a question for you. I want you to really think about this. If we found absolute, undeniable proof that advanced human history is 100,000 years older than we think, would it scare you or excite you? I want you to answer scare or excite in the comments below right now. Let's see where you stand. If you are ready to challenge everything you know about the past, make sure you are subscribed. Let's open the journal and see what history hid. To understand why the history books are wrong, you first have to understand the timeline they force us to accept. It is a linear, comfortable straight line. We are told that for hundreds of thousands of years, humans were simple hunter-gatherers, moving in small bands, surviving day to day, incapable of complex organization or monumental architecture. Then suddenly, around 6,000 years ago, the lights turned on. Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley. Civilization apparently sprang up out of nowhere, fully formed. That is the story. That is the dogma. But there are places on this earth that scream that the timeline is a lie. Turn with me to the second entry in the journal. We are going to the Anatolian region of Turkey. 6 miles from Urfa, on a dusty, wind-swept ridge, lies the smoking gun of alternative history, Göbekli Tepe. When this site was first really examined in the mid-90s, the academic world shuddered. They didn't want it to be real. Why? Because of the date. Radiocarbon dating of the organic matter found within the wall plaster places the construction of these massive circles at nearly 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years. Let that number sink in. This is not just old. This is 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid. This is the end of the last ice age. According to the mainstream narrative, the humans alive at this time were supposed to be chasing gazelles with flint spears, living in lean-tos made of branches. They hadn't invented the wheel. They hadn't invented pottery. They certainly hadn't invented agriculture. And yet, here they were, moving T-shaped limestone pillars weighing up to 50 tons. Walking through the excavation site, the first thing that hits you is the artistic maturity. These aren't crude stick figures. The pillars are carved with high-relief sculptures of boars, foxes, lions, scorpions, and vultures. This is 3D art, carved out of the solid rock face, not glued on. To do that, you have to envision the final 3D shape inside the stone and carve away the negative space. That requires abstract thinking and artistic training that primitives aren't supposed to have. But the engineering is the real nightmare for the skeptics. Ground-penetrating radar suggests that what we have excavated so far, these 4 stunning stone circles, is just 5% of the complex. There are at least 20 more circles buried underground. And buried is the key word. This is the detail that keeps me awake at night. Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed by an earthquake. It wasn't conquered. Around 8000 BC, the people who built it, or the people who inherited it, systematically buried it. They brought in thousands of tons of clean soil and debris and covered their cathedral. They hid it from the world. Why? Were they trying to protect it from a cataclysm, a flood, a shift in the climate? Or were they hiding it from someone else? Mainstream archaeologists try to tell us this was a ritual site built by hunter-gatherers who gathered for a season, but the logistics of feeding the hundreds of workers required to move 50-ton pillars implies agriculture. It implies hierarchy. It implies a civilization that had been around for thousands of years before 10,000 BC to develop these skills. You don't just wake up one morning in the Ice Age and decide to build the world's first megalithic temple without a few thousand years of practice. Göbekli Tepe proves that the timeline is broken. But if we travel southeast, to the lush volcanic islands of Indonesia, we find a site that suggests the timeline isn't just broken, it's shattered. Entry number 4, Gunung Padang. For decades, locals thought this was just a hill with some old ruins on top. Gunung Padang means mountain of light or field mountain. The surface is covered in these strange, rectangular columns of volcanic rock, columnar basalt, scattered like a giant's game of Jenga. Archaeologists looked at the surface and said, okay, maybe 2,000 years old. Impressive, but standard. But then, a geologist named Dr. Danny Hillman Natawidjaja started asking the forbidden questions. He didn't look at the surface. He looked inside. Using geoelectric scanning, ground-penetrating radar, and core drilling, the same tools we use to find oil or hidden bunkers, he found that this isn't a natural hill. It's a construction, a pyramid, disguised by thousands of years of jungle growth. The scans revealed distinct chambers and tunnels deep inside the structure. But the core samples are the heresy. When they drilled down into the 3rd and 4th layers of the structure, they found organic material trapped between the rock slabs. They sent it to the lab for carbon dating. They expected it to come back as maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years old. The results came back. The lab technicians probably checked their machines twice. The organic material in the deep layers dated back to 20,000 years ago. Some samples even pushed towards 24,000 years. Do you realize what that means? 24,000 years ago is the height of the last glacial maximum, the Ice Age. Europe was under ice sheets miles thick. Ocean levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. Indonesia wasn't an archipelago, it was part of a massive continent called Sundaland. If Gunung Padang is truly a man-made pyramid from that era, it changes everything. It means there was a civilization capable of monumental construction at a time when humans were allegedly indistinguishable from animals in their cognitive development. Critics scream contamination. They say the carbon samples were from natural roots. But Dr. Hillman is a careful scientist. The samples came from soil that was used as mortar, intentional filler between the stones. And consider the shape. The scans show that the builders took a natural lava hill and sculpted it. They wrapped it in masonry. They reinforced it. This is terraforming on a massive scale. The implications of Göbekli Tepe and Gunung Padang are identical. We are looking at the remnants of a culture that thrived during the Ice Age, a culture that was wiped out. Think about the dates. 12,000 years ago for the burial of Göbekli Tepe. This coincides violently with the period known as the Younger Dryas, a time of sudden, cataclysmic climate change. Temperatures plummeted, sea levels rose rapidly, massive megafauna went extinct. Was Göbekli Tepe buried to save it from this cataclysm? Was the civilization that built Gunung Padang drowned when the ice melted and the Sundaland continent was swallowed by the sea? The age anomalies tell us that the history of human engineering is not a ladder, climbing steadily from primitive to advanced. It is a cycle, a rise and a fall. We are walking through the ruins of a forgotten ancestor, looking at their greatness and calling it natural formations or ritual sites because we are too arrogant to admit that we might not be the first masters of this planet. But if the age of these sites is disturbing, the method of their construction is impossible. We can argue about carbon dating all day, but you cannot argue with gravity. You cannot argue with weight. Turn the page. We are going to the Americas. We are going to look at stones that defy the laws of physics. If the timeline is the smoke, then the weight of these stones is the fire. You can fudge a date in a textbook. You can argue about carbon layers, but you cannot argue with 300 tons of rock. It is there, it is heavy, and it demands an explanation that history refuses to give. Turn with me to the third entry. We are going to the Andes Mountains, high above the city of Cusco in Peru. We are going to the fortress of Sacsayhuaman. When the Spanish conquistadors first arrived in Cusco, they were hardened men. They had seen the great cathedrals of Europe. They were not easily impressed. Yet when they saw these walls, they fell to their knees. They wrote back to the King of Spain that this could not be the work of men. It must be the work of demons. Standing here today, I understand why they were terrified. Sacsayhuaman is built in a zigzag pattern, like the teeth of a saw. The walls are composed of blocks of diorite and limestone that are not just big, they are monstrous. We are talking about single stones standing 28 feet tall and weighing anywhere from 120 to 300 tons. Let's contextualize that. A modern diesel locomotive weighs about 200 tons. Imagine picking up a locomotive not with a crane, but with your hands. Now imagine carrying it up a mountain at an altitude where the air is so thin you get winded just tying your shoelaces. The mainstream historians, the ones who have never worked a day of manual labor in their lives, will tell you the Incas did this. They say the Incas used hemp ropes and log rollers. Log rollers? In the Andes? First of all, where are you getting the trees? This is high-altitude terrain. The trees that grow here are gnarled and small. To get logs capable of withstanding 300 tons of pressure without crushing into pulp, you would need to import hardwood from the Amazon basin, miles away and thousands of feet down. And even if you had the rollers, look at the terrain. It is rugged, uneven, and steep. You cannot roll a 300-ton square block up a 40-degree incline on logs. Physics does not allow it. The friction alone would snap any natural fiber rope you could manufacture. But the weight is only half the mystery. It is the placement. These stones are not mortar-bound. There is no cement holding them together. They are held in place by their own massive weight and the most complex joinery I have ever seen. They are polygonal, meaning they have many sides. They aren't cut into uniform bricks. They are cut into strange, irregular puzzle pieces that interlock in 3 dimensions. I have taken a piece of paper, a single thin sheet from this very journal, and tried to slide it between these stones. It is impossible. The fit is so tight that the stones have effectively fused. Why go to this trouble? Why make every stone a different shape? Why not just cut square blocks? Because of earthquakes. The Andes are seismically active. When the ground shakes, square blocks topple. But these polygonal walls, they dance. When an earthquake hits, these stones move, they rattle, they adjust, and when the shaking stops, they settle back into their perfect fit. The Incas were incredible people. They were masters of agriculture, textiles, and administration. But when asked by the Spanish how these walls were built, the Incas themselves said, "We didn't build them. They were here when we arrived." They called the builders the Viracochas, the gods who walked the earth in the time before time. The Incas built on top of these walls with small, rough stones held together with mud mortar. You can see the difference with your own eyes. The bottom layer is high-tech, massive, and precise. The top layer is primitive. We are looking at a lost technology of weight manipulation. And if you think Peru is impossible, turn the page to entry number 6. We are going higher, into the desolate altiplano of Bolivia. Welcome to Pumapunku. If Sacsayhuaman is a fortress, Pumapunku is a factory. We are now at nearly 13,000 feet above sea level. This is above the tree line. No crops grow here. It is a frozen, barren wasteland. Yet scattered across this plateau are the ruins of what looks like a prefabricated city. The primary mystery here is the material. These blocks are made of gray andesite and red sandstone. Andesite is an igneous rock. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, it ranks a 6 or a 7. That is harder than iron. It is nearly as hard as the granite we use for countertops. To cut andesite, you need something harder than the stone itself. You need diamond-tipped tools or tungsten carbide. The academic story is that the Aymara people, who lived here around 500 AD, built this using copper chisels and stone hammers. Copper. Copper is a soft metal. If you strike andesite with a copper chisel, the chisel will bend. You might as well try to cut down a redwood tree with a plastic spoon. It is physically impossible to quarry and shape these stones with the tools found in the archaeological record. And then, there is the transport. The red sandstone slabs that form the base of the complex weigh 130 tons. The quarry for the sandstone is 10 kilometers away. The quarry for the andesite is nearly 100 kilometers away. Between the quarries and this site, there are steep mountain ranges and deep ravines. How did they move 100-ton slabs across a mountain range without the wheel? Without draft animals? Llamas can only carry about 100 pounds. Without trees for rollers? Mainstream archaeologists suggest mud ramps. At 13,000 feet? Where is the water coming from to make the mud? And if you have ever tried to drag a heavy object through mud, you know it creates suction, not lubrication. The sheer logistics of Pumapunku defy every explanation we have. It suggests that whoever built this didn't just have manpower. They had a power source. They had a way to negate weight or apply massive mechanical force that we simply don't see in the archaeological record. When you walk among these ruins, you don't feel like you are looking at a temple built by superstitious tribes. You feel like you are walking through the wreckage of a loading dock. The stones are utilitarian, they are standardized, but the size of them, it haunts you. We are a species that prides itself on our cranes and our hydraulics. We built the Burj Khalifa. We built the Hoover Dam. But if we had to transport a 100-ton block of andesite up a mountain in Bolivia today, without roads, we would struggle. Someone, thousands of years ago, did it. And they didn't just move them, they machined them. Because getting the stones to the site is only the first impossible hurdle. What they did to the stones once they arrived is what truly breaks the narrative. It's not just about the weight anymore. It's about the cut. Turn the page. We need to talk about the engineers. We need to talk about the impossible precision that should not exist in the ancient world. Weight is one thing. You can explain weight away with enough manpower. If you have 10,000 men and 10 years, maybe, just maybe, you can drag a heavy rock. But precision? Precision is different. Precision requires tooling. You cannot throw human bodies at a geometry problem. Stay with me in Bolivia for just one more moment. We looked at the weight of Pumapunku, but I need you to look closer. I need you to look at the H blocks. These are not rough-hewn stones. They are identical, prefabricated geometric components. They have complex inner angles, right angles that are perfect to within a fraction of a degree, and drilled holes that run through the stone with the consistency of a laser-guided machine. Run your finger inside one of these grooves. It is smooth as glass. If this were done with copper chisels and stone-pounding balls, as the textbooks claim, the surface would be pitted. It would be uneven. It would show the impact fractures of the tool. These stones show none of that. They look like they were molded or milled. Archaeologists found no diamond drills here. They found no laser cutters, so they ignore the evidence of the stone itself. But the stone is screaming that the people who built this knew geometry and machining that we didn't rediscover until the Industrial Revolution. But if you think this technology was isolated to the Andes, you are wrong. The fingerprints of these engineers are global. Turn the page to entry number 7. We are going to Egypt. But we are not going to the pyramids. We are going south to Abydos. We are going to the Oceanic. This site is a ghost story in stone. It was discovered by accident in the early 1900s by archaeologists excavating the temple of Seti I. They found that the temple, which is covered in beautiful, intricate, classic Egyptian hieroglyphs, was built on top of something else. They dug down, and they found this. The Oceanic sits far below the ground level of the Seti temple. It is built from massive red granite pillars, weighing up to 100 tons each. But look at the style. There is no mortar. There are no carvings. There are no hieroglyphs praising the pharaohs. It is stark, industrial, and utterly devoid of ego. It looks nothing like the intricate temples above it. The mainstream timeline says, "Seti, I built this." But does that make sense? Why would a pharaoh, the most boastful type of ruler in history, build a massive temple, cover it in art, and then dig a hole in the backyard to build a stark, silent bunker with no name on it? It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is that the Oceanic was already here. Seti didn't build it. He discovered it. He built his temple next to the holy place of the ancestors. The precision of the joints in the Oceanic is baffling. You have 100-ton granite blocks fitted together so perfectly that the water from the rising water table cannot penetrate the seams, yet the stone itself is porous. This is the same megalithic style we saw in Peru, the same pillow face on the stones, the same lack of mortar, the same unnecessary size. It is as if the same architect designed both, using a blueprint that spans oceans. But if we are talking about size, if we are talking about the absolute limits of what is possible, we have to go east. We have to go to China. Entry number 5. The Yangshan Quarry. I want you to prepare yourself. We have been talking about blocks weighing 100 tons, 300 tons, maybe 1,000 tons at Baalbek. The unfinished stele at Yangshan makes Baalbek look like a pebble. Located near Nanjing, this quarry was allegedly worked during the Ming Dynasty, around the 1400s. That is the story. They say the emperor ordered a massive stele for his father's tomb. But then you look at the math. There are 3 unfinished pieces here: the base, the body, and the head of the stele. If you combine them, as was the apparent plan, the monument would stand 73 meters tall. That is a skyscraper. And the weight? The body alone weighs nearly 9,000 tons. The base is 6,000 tons. The head is another 6,000. Total weight, over 30,000 tons. Let me repeat that. 30,000 tons. The largest modern crane in the world, the Tyson gantry crane, can lift 20,000 tons, and it is a fixed structure in a shipyard. It cannot move. We are led to believe that in the 1400s, the Chinese engineers planned to move a 30,000-ton rock out of a mountain, drag it 20 kilometers to the tomb, and stand it up. It is historically absurd. The Ming Dynasty engineers were brilliant, but they weren't magicians. They knew their limits. They wouldn't have cut a stone they had zero hope of moving, unless they didn't cut it. Look at the tool marks on the side of the mountain. They don't look like chisel marks. They look like the rock has been scooped out. They look like the track of a massive machine. And look at these knobs protruding from the stone. We see these same knobs on the walls in Peru. We see them on the stones in Egypt. Archaeologists say they were for lifting, but on a rock this size, a knob would snap off instantly if you tried to tie a rope to it. They are not for lifting. They are a byproduct of the manufacturing process, a process we have forgotten. Yangshan, the Osirian, Pumapunku, they all share the same silence. They don't have inscriptions telling us I built this. They just exist, defying our ability to replicate them. We are looking at the remnants of a global engineering capability that treated granite like styrofoam. But the most damning piece of evidence isn't on a continent. It isn't in a quarry, it is in the middle of the most isolated place on Earth. A place so remote that the official history says no one found it until 800 AD. But the stones tell a different story. The stones say someone was navigating the open oceans long before the Vikings or Columbus. Turn the page. We are going to the Pacific. We are going to find the link that connects the Andes to the rest of the world. If the continents were the only places we found these anomalies, the skeptics might have a chance. They could argue for migration routes, lost trade roads across the Silk Road, or cultural diffusion over land. But the mystery doesn't stop at the shoreline. It walks right into the surf and keeps going. Open the journal to entry number 8. We are traveling to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We are going to the remote island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, to a place called Nan Madol. They call it the Venice of the Pacific, but that name is too soft. It implies romance and gondolas. Nan Madol is not romantic, it is imposing. It is an impossible city built on top of a coral reef consisting of nearly 100 artificial islets separated by canals. But look at the construction material. The entire city is built from columnar basalt logs. These are natural volcanic formations, yes, but they have been harvested, transported, and stacked like Lincoln logs. Some of these stone logs weigh 50 tons. The sheer scale of the material moved here is mind-bending. Geologists estimate there are roughly 250 million tons of rock making up Nan Madol. 250 million tons. For context, the Great Pyramid of Giza is estimated to contain about 6 million tons of stone. Nan Madol is nearly 40 times larger in terms of material volume, and this is on a tiny island in the middle of nowhere. The local population today is small. The population in antiquity would have been even smaller. Where did the manpower come from? How did they float 50-ton basalt columns on fragile rafts across the ocean swells? If you ask the locals, they don't talk about rafts. They tell the legend of the brothers Olosopa and Olosipa. They say these sorcerers used magical songs to make the heavy stones fly through the air and settle into place like birds. Sound, vibration, levitation. We hear this same story in Egypt. We hear it in Bolivia. And here, thousands of miles across the empty ocean, the same impossible legend explains the same impossible weight. But Nan Madol is just the first stop in the Blue Wilderness. We have one more connection to make, a connection that ties the loop of this global mystery together. Turn to the final entry. Entry number 10, Easter Island. I know what you are picturing. The Moai, the big heads. We have all seen them. We are told the Polynesians cut them, walked them into place, and that's that. But I'm not here to talk about the statues. I'm here to talk about what the statues are standing on. Go to the southern coast of the island. Go to a site called Ahu Vinapu. Look closely at this wall. Does it look familiar? If I showed you this photo without context, you would swear we were back in Peru. You would swear we were standing at Sacsayhuaman or Cusco. The construction style is identical. The same massive pillow-faced stones. The same complex, irregular polygonal cuts. The same puzzle-piece joinery that is so tight you cannot fit a blade of grass between the blocks. This is not a coincidence. You do not accidentally invent this specific, incredibly difficult style of engineering on a lonely island 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Mainstream historians say there was no contact between South America and the Pacific Islands. They say the oceans were a barrier. But Ahu Vinapu proves the oceans were a highway. Whoever built the walls of Peru also built the walls of Easter Island. The DNA of the architecture is undeniable. It suggests a maritime civilization that could navigate the globe with the same ease that we fly from New York to London. They were everywhere. They were in the mountains of the Andes. They were in the deserts of Egypt. They were on the islands of the Pacific. And, if you are willing to look at the most controversial site of all, they were in the frozen heart of Siberia. I saved this for last because it is the most frightening. It is entry number 9, Gornaya Shoria. Located deep in the Russian mountains, this site makes everything else we have discussed look like a model kit. We see rectilinear blocks stacked on top of one another. We see seams. We see structure. But the size. At Baalbek, we marveled at 1,000 tons. At Gornaya Shoria, geologists have estimated some of these granite blocks weigh upward of 3,000 tons. 3,000 tons. If these are artificial and the stacking pattern, the flat surfaces, and the right angles suggest they are, then we are dealing with a civilization that possessed power we can barely conceptualize. Mainstream geology tries to dismiss this as natural fracturing. They say the rock just cracked that way. But nature rarely creates 90-degree angles on stacked blocks for hundreds of feet. Nature doesn't build walls. If Gornaya Shoria is artificial, it is the smoking gun of a lost epoch where gravity was a solved problem. So, let's look at the map one last time. Lebanon, Turkey, Peru, Indonesia, China, Bolivia, Egypt, Micronesia, Siberia, Easter Island. Connect the dots. What you see is not a collection of random, isolated tribes banging rocks together. What you see is a footprint, the footprint of a giant. We have been taught that we are the first, that we are the apex. But the stones are telling us that we are merely the survivors living in the wreckage of something far greater. The evidence is in the journal. The measurements are real. The weights are real. The only thing that isn't real is the history book on your shelf. So where does that leave us? We have traveled from the high Andes to the depths of Siberia. We have looked at stones that weigh as much as warships and cuts that rival the precision of modern lasers. We have seen the same architectural signature, the polygonal walls, the megalithic scale, the obsession with granite, scattered across oceans that were supposed to be impassable. The skeptic will tell you that this is all just a coincidence. They will tell you that 10 different primitive cultures, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all just happened to decide that dragging 300-ton blocks of stone up mountains was a good use of their time. They will tell you that the carbon dating is wrong, that the tool marks are mistakes, and that the legends are just fairy tales. But at what point does coincidence become a pattern? At what point does the sheer volume of evidence demand a verdict? The truth is, the mainstream timeline is a house of cards. It rests on the assumption that we are the first. It assumes that civilization is a straight line, always moving up, always improving. But the stones tell a different story. They tell a story of cycles. They tell us that we are a species with amnesia. We have awakened in a ruined house, surrounded by the technology of a family we have forgotten. We play with their leftovers. We build our small mud brick huts on top of their cyclopean walls. We look at their great machines and call them idols. Something happened on this planet 12,000 years ago. The ice melted, the oceans rose, the animals died, and a chapter of human history was wiped clean. All that remains are the imperishable things, the stones. I am not asking you to believe in aliens. I am asking you to believe in humans. I am asking you to believe that our ancestors were smarter, stronger, and more capable than the textbooks give them credit for. They left these messages in stone not to boast, but to warn. They built for eternity because they knew how fragile civilization really is. This journal is not finished. We have only scratched the surface. There are caves in India, underwater ruins in Japan, and mounds in North America that are waiting to tell their secrets. If you felt that chill down your spine today, that feeling that the world is bigger and older than you were told, then you are ready for what comes next. Join me, subscribe to the channel, help us fund the next expedition. Because the history books are closed, but the ground is still open. My name is Dr. Silas Vance. This is the truth about our past. And remember, the stones are speaking. All we have to do is listen.